So welcome everyone to the webinar. This is Speed Reading 101. I'm your host, Paul Nowak. I'm the founder and CEO here at Iris Reading, and I want to welcome you to the webinar. Thanks for coming. I think you'll find this very helpful, especially if you're doing a lot of reading on a day-to-day basis. And let me get right into what we're going to cover today. First of all, how fast you currently read. You know, some people know their typing speed, but not everyone knows their reading speed. So we'll find that out and we'll talk about what the averages are. We'll also discuss how to improve your focus while you're reading. Especially when you're reading dry material, it can be difficult to concentrate. And of course, the better concentration you have, the better your speed is going to be, and of course your comprehension too. Some people have trouble focusing while they read. We'll also cover how to improve comprehension. And I know this is a Speed Reading 101 webinar, but I want to address some simple ways you can improve comprehension, and also how to read faster on the computer screen. That's another thing to address. A lot of us are, I think I do most of my reading, maybe 80% of it, on the computer screen. And most people tend to read a little slower on the screen. So we'll talk about how to go faster and how to build up your reading speed through practice drills. We'll actually take you through a practice exercise today and with the goal of trying to help you make an improvement right on the spot here. So a little bit about us if you're not already familiar. Iris Reading is the largest provider of speed reading and memorization classes. We do them online, we do them in person, and these classes are kind of all over the place. We do them in cities across the U.S. I'll have a few of the cities up in a few moments here, but real quick introduction how I got involved teaching speed reading. I learned speed reading during my freshman year of college. I was a pretty good student in high school, but I struggled with reading in college because it was the first time where I had to read, over 100 pages every single week. And the only class I was keeping up with was calculus because there was no reading to do in calculus. So I'm falling behind in my classes. I felt like there just wasn't enough time in the day because I had 5 classes my first semester of college. I was also working a part-time job on the weekends. Additionally, I was on the basketball team, and it was just really, really difficult to keep up. And I started meeting with my professors, and most of them gave me the same advice. They said, look, just come to class and get the reading done, and you'll be fine. And I felt like there just wasn't enough time to get all that reading done. I did have one professor that gave me a little bit different advice, and he suggested that I take a speed reading course. He told me he took one when he was in college, and it helped him out quite a bit. So I looked around for a speed reading class in Chicago. That's where I was born and raised. That's where I went to school. And I could not find any speed reading courses. So I went back to my professor, and I asked him if he could teach me because he told me he took a class, so I figured he can teach me what he learned. So he told me to come in during his office hours and we would work on it. And I remember my first day, he measures my reading speed. And by the way, we're going to measure your reading speed in a few moments here. But my reading speed initially, it was 190 words per minute, which is around average. And by the way, I was so relieved to know that I was average because for the longest, I thought I was a below average reader. But I was at 190, and my professor told me you shouldn't be content with this because 190, although it's average, in college, you've got a lot of reading to do. And those of you that are in grad school know, or if you're done with grad school, it gets harder from beyond your undergrad years. So he told me I need to be closer to 400 words per minute, more than double my current speed. So he also gave me a standardized reading test. I scored a lousy 60% on it because I always ran out of time on those tests. We went through about 10 hours of training, not in one day, but I would come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays for like an hour, hour and a half. And after about 10 hours of training, my speed went from 190 to 830. And so a little over 4 times faster. Comprehension-wise, on the standardized reading test, I went from 60% to 83%. And I hate to sound cliche and call it a life-changing experience, but if you're reading 4 times faster, that changes so many things for you. For me, it was catching up with all the material I was behind on, keeping up with it. My freshman year, I pulled off a perfect GPA. I didn't maintain that because college gets harder as you go through, but this helped me tremendously going through school. My sophomore year, I had to start working a full-time job while I was in school. My parents were having some financial difficulties, and I didn't want to drop out of school. I wanted to help out financially, so I would schedule all my classes at night, and I found a full-time job. I was going to school at DePaul University, and they kind of cater to students that are continuing education and working downtown in Chicago. So I would work from 8 o'clock to 4. I found an internship working at the Chicago Board of Trade on the trading floor. I was a finance major, so that was it was a great experience for me. I'd work from 8 to 4 during market hours, and then I would take classes from 6 to 9:15 at night. if I was still reading at 190, it would be impossible to juggle a 35 to 40 hour a week job, full-time job and full-time school, and manage to graduate within 4 years and with a decent GPA. So this helped me tremendously learning these skills. The way I started teaching them is as I was going through school, when I would get out of work, I'd go to campus and I'd sit in the library or the student lounge, get some reading done, and every so often I'd have a classmate that would see me reading and they would ask me, well, are you actually reading that fast or are you skimming? And I would tell them, well, I learned some speed reading techniques, and I always got the question, well, how's that work? What's the trick? By the way, there's no trick. It takes practice like anything else. And I would give them little tips and tidbits and explain how they should go about practicing. And I'd get these questions throughout college. Finally, it's my senior year. I got one more elective that I have to take, but it has to fit into my schedule on a Thursday evening. The only class that was available was an entrepreneurship class. And in that class that I signed up for, we had to come up with a business idea, write a business plan, and then execute that plan to some extent. And for lack of any other business ideas, and because I kept getting questions about speed reading, I decided I'll start a little speed reading tutoring service on campus. And this is actually how this organization was started. Iris Reading was started by me about 11 years ago. We started off just doing classes on college campuses. I'd post some flyers on campus. It was a class project, so I already had a full-time job. So students that would contact me, I was teaching them on weekends. And one of the things I found was I just really loved teaching. It was a lot of fun. I didn't want to change my major at that point because I was about to graduate and I had a full-time job offer. So when I graduated, I kept on working in finance, but this was something I was doing on the side, in the evenings, on the weekends. Little by little, we started to grow. We've now done these courses in over 50 cities across the U.S. We're doing them now internationally in places like Toronto, Singapore, London, and other places. So I wanted to give you an idea how we got involved, how I got involved doing this. We now have a very large staff. I mean, we're not a company with hundreds and hundreds of employees, but we've got a lot of reach. We've been doing it in over 50 cities, from employees at NASA to students at places like Harvard, Stanford. And I wanted to mention this because all of us have to read. Some of us read more than others, but if you can double up your speed and save up half that time, that's, you're creating more time in your schedule. So if you're interested in additional courses, you can check them out online and in person. Here are some of the cities where we have classes. If you want to see the full schedule of all the cities where we're available, you can check it out on our website at irisreading.com. By the way, you could also invite us to do a private class at your company or your school. So feel free to reach out. Our contact info is on the website, and I'll have it at the end of this webinar too. So our focus is speed. We want to read faster. Comprehension. We want to understand the material. And retention. We want to remember the material. By the way, there's a subtle difference between comprehension and retention. Comprehension is what you're understanding the moment you're actually reading it, and retention is obviously what do you remember later on. Sometimes you could have pretty good comprehension and then horrible retention. You forget everything you just read. And that's happened to all of us. So let's start by figuring out your current reading speed. I have a timer here. And in a moment on the next slide, I'm going to pull up a sample article that I want you to read. And we're going to start with just 1 minute of reading. So on my timer, you'll hear it go off at the end of the minute like this. And for the 1 minute of reading, I want you to go at your normal reading speed. Read it for good comprehension. Don't try to go faster than usual. Don't go slower than usual. Go at whatever pace feels comfortable. And we're only going to read for a minute so we can quickly find out what your current reading speed is. Now, to make sure I'm not distracting you while you're reading, I'm going to turn off my webcam, and I will also, I'll try to remain silent over here while you're reading. It looks like when I turn off my microphone, the screen switches, so I don't want the screen to switch. So I'm going to pull up the article here and just read this the way you normally would. We're going to read for 1 minute. Ready, set, and go. Okay, look at the line where you stopped and take note of your speed. Do you see all those numbers on the side there? They will help you figure out what your speed was. They tell you how many words there are up to the very end of the line. So right here, at the end of this line, there are 249 words. If you finish the paragraph, that would be 250. So try to figure out, you can figure out precisely how fast you read. And take note of that. Go ahead and write it down somewhere, because not just during this webinar, at the end of the webinar, I will show you how to continue making more improvements. So how do we figure out what kind of improvements we're making? We need to know where we're starting. So make sure you take note of the speed, very important. So write it down somewhere or take note of it on your computer. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what's the average? Average reading speed here. The average speed is 150 to 250. Now, that is for medium level material. When I say medium level material, I mean material like what you had on your screen. Medium level in difficulty. This is not too easy, and it's not too hard. You know, it's not advanced level physics, and it's also not Dr. Seuss. Middle of the road difficulty material would be an average of 150 to 250, but this is for adults in the US, just to keep that in mind. And you know, this number may vary country to country. It depends on literacy rates, of course, too. But for adults in the US 18 and up, it's 150 to 250. What about college-educated adults? It's a little bit higher. Instead of 150 to 250, it's actually 200 to 300. And 30 years ago, do you think this average speed was higher or lower? It was actually a little lower. I'm sorry, it was a little higher. It's lower now. 30 years ago, it was a little higher. It was 250 to 350 30 years ago. That's obviously a problem because the average speed has gone down. And I think part of that has to do with attention spans and distractions. It's harder to maintain your focus now, or there's more things trying to distract you now than 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, you could be reading through some material, and halfway through, you're not going to get a text message, right? 30 years ago, you wouldn't have a mobile phone. You're not going to check, I wonder how many people liked my new profile picture on Facebook, or let me see if so-and-so got back to me on that email. It's so easy to get distracted now because there's a lot of things competing for our attention. And I think that's part of the reason why the average speed has gone down. One other thing to note here, this average is based on a single minute of reading. I could have measured your speed over 2 minutes. We would just have to divide by 2. We could have done 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour. Why did we do it for 1 minute? 1, because it's fast, and 2, because we want to be able to compare apples to apples. Other organizations, when they measure reading speed, they do it based on a 1-minute test, because other organizations do the same. So that makes it easy to compare apples to apples. But there's also a downside to this. Who reads for 1 minute and just stops? I mean, most people will continue reading, and they'll have maybe longer material. You might be, when you're studying, you might be reading 20, 30 or more minutes at a time. So what do you think happens to the average speed when you read for a long period of time? It drops off, right? Have you ever read like a whole page of text, and then you look up like, I have no clue what I just read? That's happened to all of us, right? So this average reading speed, keep in mind, realistically, it's probably a little bit lower if we took into account extended periods of time spent reading. So let's talk about how we start going faster. Easiest way to start building up your speed. And it's very simple. To start, use your hand as a guide. When I say use your hand as a guide, I mean something like this. It could be, you know, your whole hand like that. It could be your finger, or it could even be a pen to go across from line to line, left to right. In English, not every language goes left to right. But when you're reading along like this, the reason why using your hand or a pen can be helpful, now I'm doing this like for demonstration purposes, obviously you'd be faced like this, but the point is to get something moving on the page because your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. Anything that moves around naturally gets your attention. So this is a simple way that you can improve your focus. Remember we talked earlier that you know, some people have trouble concentrating while they're reading. The easiest way to improve your concentration is put your finger or pen on the page and let that movement guide your eyes, because your eyes are naturally attracted to motion. Think about it this way. If there was a bee flying around in your room, it would be distracting, right? One, because it's a bee. and 2, because anything that moves around will just naturally get our attention. So we're trying to create some movement on the page so we pay more attention. Now, how do we improve comprehension? Well, a simple tactic you can take is slowing down and speeding up at key points. Think about it like when you're driving. You don't always drive at the same speed, and you shouldn't always read at the same speed. We should sometimes slow down, sometimes speed up. And there are key points. A good rule of thumb to follow would be to slow down on the first sentence of each paragraph. So let's say you had a short one-page article like this. To slow down on the first sentence of each paragraph and then speed up a little bit after the first sentence. That's helpful because, well, what is the first sentence? The first sentence is usually the main idea, right? Not always, but usually. Or you might call it the topic sentence. However you want to call it, the first sentence tells us, here's what we're going to discuss in the paragraph, and now we're going to give you some details. When we get a new paragraph, it just repeats. And that's a good way to get better comprehension, because when you slow down and speed up, it's another way to almost trick yourself into paying more attention. Think about it this way. If we go back to the whole driving analogy, if you think about driving in, I'm broadcasting from Chicago right now. When you're driving downtown in Chicago, you are constantly changing your speed because you have to watch out for pedestrians, street lights, other signs, other cars, things like that. But think about driving through the middle of nowhere, maybe a rural area where it's just a straight road, barely any cars, and you're just going at a constant speed, maybe 70 miles an hour. How much focus are you paying attention on a straight road, constant speed, versus an urban area where you're constantly slowing down, speeding up, trying to avoid hitting cars and pedestrians? You pay more attention in that urban area because, as a function of speed, that slowing down and speeding up is forcing you to pay more attention. In a similar way, that's how we pay attention to people that talk. Have you ever had maybe a teacher in the past that spoke in a monotone voice like this? When people speak in a monotone voice, a very constant rate, it's easy for us to kind of space out because the speed at which they're talking is not changing. The volume is not changing. But in normal conversation, when you have with your friends or colleagues, you're constantly changing up your volume and your speed at which you talk, because that's just how regular people talk. But sometimes we come across someone that might talk in a monotone voice, and it's harder to pay attention because of that constant speed. So let's switch back to reading now. When we're changing up our reading speed, it's a good way to improve our focus, because we're essentially tricking ourselves into focusing more. We get to a new paragraph, we slow down a little bit, speed up a little bit, slow down, speed up. That's very easy to do when you're using your hand or pen as a guide. But I do understand that using your hand is not always helpful. If you're reading on the computer screen, nobody wants to be dragging their finger across the screen. I mean, I guess you could try to use your mouse, but I'm working right now off of a laptop, and my mouse pad is only so large, it's not easy to guide your eyes across the screen with a mouse. And what if you're reading off your phone or a touch screen? That's definitely not going to be helpful. So let's talk about reading on the screen. There is a speed reading tool, an application that we developed here at Iris, and it helps you read faster on the computer screen. This is a free speed reading application. It's available on the web, and it's called Accelerator. If you go to accelerator.com, you don't have to go there right now. I'm going to show you how it works. You can jot this down if you like. But the way Accelerator works is essentially you have to copy and paste text into a text box in the application. So let me show you exactly how it works. We're going to take some sample reading material from The Onion. Are you guys familiar with The Onion? And if you aren't, you're in for a treat. It's a satirical news site. Here's some world scientists admit they don't like mice. Let's copy that text. We're going to go to accelerator.com and paste it there. Now, this is just some sample text. We're going to delete that. We're going to paste what we copied. And then we're going to click the green begin button. And then we're going to click read. These are the first two words on the screen, nearly 700. Try to keep track here. Okay, all right, I think you get the idea there. That's how the application works. It's called accelerator.com. We just read a few paragraphs from there, but you can tell the application's blinking words on the screen. You may have noticed it was blinking 2 words at a time. That can be helpful because most people just read 1 word at a time. So if you can start reading groups of words, and you're perfectly capable of doing this, you can speed up your reading. Now, we are working on turning this into an Android and iPhone app. We'll email you when that's available. We're getting close to finishing that up, but right now it's available on the web if you go to accelerator.com. Let's talk about how most people read. You see this little green dot kind of bouncing around. By the way, if you don't see it, there might be a little delay in this application. But this is how most people tend to read. They have, let's say this green dot was your eyes. Most people kind of bounce around from word to word, and sometimes you ever go back and go like, wait, hold on a second. Oh yeah, there we go. We've all gone back, right? Now, there are essentially 3 old reading habits that we need to change if we're going to start reading faster. And one of them is called fixation. Fixation is something your eyes do. They will fixate on a word-by-word basis. And the issue with this is that you don't necessarily have to fixate on a word-by-word basis. You can read groups of words. We mentioned that before. Actually, just by utilizing that accelerator application, you can prove to yourself, and you can even train yourself to read 2 words at a time, 3 words at a time. You can make those changes, by the way, in the settings of that application. Oh, also, remember we talked about slowing down and speeding up? There's a setting in the application that'll do it for you to change up your speed. But when we're reading normally in I don't know, some physical piece of material like a book or a magazine, our eyes, most people will go one by one. And the problem is you can read 2, 3, 4 words at a time. So it's a matter of changing this habit and starting to read groups of words. That's one way to speed up. Another way to speed up or save time is to limit the amount of time we spend going back, and they call this regression. This habit is, all of us have done this. We read something, we didn't understand it, we read it again. You ever read the same stupid sentence like 7 or 8 times and you're wondering, why is this not making sense? And this is a good example of what I would call a pointless regression. Let's say you read the sentence, didn't make sense. You read it again and again and again. Sometimes you could read a sentence multiple times and it doesn't make sense because sometimes this sentence doesn't make sense until we read the next sentence or the rest of the paragraph. And that happens all the time when we're reading. And some people will reread one sentence at a time over and over again. There are some sentences you could read 1,000,000 times and you'll never understand them unless you finish the paragraph. So what I'm suggesting here is try to avoid going back after a single sentence. Instead, nothing's wrong with going back, but try to finish a paragraph first. If you finish a paragraph, didn't understand it well, then you should definitely go back. But not after a single sentence, because sometimes you got to continue reading to understand the whole thing fully. It's just like when you're watching movies. You ever watch a movie that's confusing at the beginning? Do you stop the movie and say, you know what, I didn't understand that first scene. Let's rewatch it. No, you know how movies go. You know that at some point, maybe in the middle or at the end, it's going to start making more sense. That's just how movies are, and that's also how books are written, fiction and also nonfiction. There's a third habit called subvocalization. This is basically saying the words in your head. Remember when you were first learning to read, you had to read out loud? I used to hate reading out loud. English is not my first language, it's Polish. Both of my parents are immigrants from Poland. I was born in Chicago, but I didn't speak any English until I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I used to hate reading out loud because I would always mess up on words. And eventually, your teacher doesn't want you to read out loud. The good news is eventually your teacher says, say the word silently in your head. So that's what this habit is. This third habit is called subvocalization. It's that voice you hear in your head while you're reading. So have you noticed that while you're reading you hear voices in your head? And it doesn't mean you're crazy. It's your voice. If it's another voice, then you might be in the wrong session here today. But that voice you hear in your head while you're reading is known as subvocalization, and the problem is it slows us down. If you're saying every word in your head, that means you're going to read only as fast as you talk. And what about your thinking speed? You can think much faster than you can say the words. So we have to change these habits. And how are we going to change them? Well, how do you get better at anything? What do you got to do? Practice. So we're talking about practice here. And when we're talking about practice in regards to reading, there is a very specific way we can go about boosting our speed, boosting our comprehension, boosting our retention. There's various drills that we do, and we're going to go through one of those drills right now. If you want to go through a lot more drills, check out one of our online courses or come to one of our live classes that are cities all over the place. But let's go through one of these sample drills. I want you to understand how one of them works, and actually I want you to try to make an improvement right now. You already measured your speed at the beginning. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to practice a speed drill, and it's very easy to practice. All you got to do is purposely go faster than you would normally read. How exactly are we going to do that? Let me show you. Here is the article I had on the screen earlier, and this is the same text, first 4 paragraphs here. You're going to start back at the beginning. Now, I know you already read this for 1 minute. What I want you to do is you're going to go through this same material in less time. So how much time? I'm going to give you 40 seconds. You're going to have 40 seconds to get from the beginning all the way. Let's say when I had you read for a minute, let's say you read the first 3 paragraphs and you stopped here. Well, you're going to start at the beginning, and you got to get to that same point in 40 seconds. Now, while you're doing this, I'm going to turn my webcam off just so I don't distract anyone, but I want you to shoot for getting there in 40 seconds. Again, when I say there, I mean to the point you originally read up to in 1 minute. So it could have been here, it could have been here. Whatever you read in 1 minute, try to skim through that text. I want you to get used to, I want your eyes to get used to seeing words at a more rapid pace. So let's try it out. You've got 40 seconds, and you got to make it to the line you were originally read up to in a minute. 40 seconds, ready, set, and go. All right, that was 40 seconds. Did you make it to the line that you originally read up to? I hope you did. And we're going to try to push ourselves a little faster. Now, instead of 40 seconds, I'm only going to give you 30 seconds. Now, the goal is the same. You got to start at the beginning, and I essentially want you to speed through and skim all the text you already read in that 1 minute at the beginning of this class. You're going to fly through that material at double your normal reading speed. Now, it doesn't mean you're reading twice as fast, because we already read this for a minute. It doesn't really count as reading. This is an exercise. It's a training exercise where we're doing a speed drill, and our goal is to get used to seeing words faster. The logic here is, before we start reading faster with comprehension, we just want to get used to seeing the words faster, even if that means with very little comprehension or just skimming through the text. Let's get used to seeing words at a rate that's about 2 times our normal rate. So that's why I want you to get through there in 30 seconds. You got to get to the line you originally read up to in a minute in 30 seconds. Okay, so half the time. All right, let me put 30 seconds on the clock here. Ready, set, and go. All right, that was 30 seconds. If you made it there, very good. We're going to do a little bit of a longer drill now. Your goal, I'm going to give you 1 minute. And by the way, what you saw earlier, that was the first 4 paragraphs of a longer article. The article extends down. There's 2 additional paragraphs here at the bottom that you have not yet read. So our goal is going to be to start at the beginning. You're going to have 1 minute to make it through all of this text. I want you to get through all 581 words in 1 minute. It doesn't have to be exactly 1 minute, but I want you to go at a rate that's much faster than you might normally be reading. So Again, think of this speed drill, you can kind of think of it as skimming. I do understand that this material hasn't yet been read, and since you're going to be going faster than usual, your comprehension is not going to be that great. But you know what? We're not working on comprehension right now. We're focusing on speed. Okay, so we kind of work on these things separately. So you work on speed, you work on comprehension, you work on retention, and then you bring all of this together to become a more efficient reader. So let's prioritize speed here. You got to basically skim through all of this text, and you got to do it in 1 minute. So let me put 1 minute on the clock here. Ready, set, and go. Okay, stop. Look at the line where you stopped. Did you make it through all of it? And even if you didn't, so long as you were going faster than usual. So if you normally read 200 words per minute and you stopped somewhere at like, I don't know, 464, you were going more than 2 times your normal speed. That was our goal of the drill. Now we're going to shift back to normal reading. So I'm going to have a new article here, and I want you to go back to normal reading. When I say normal reading, I mean reading with comprehension. The drill that we just did, that was not normal reading, that was a practice exercise. I was asking you to go faster than you would normally go. So now I want you to scale things back, slow down, not too slow, but also don't go too fast. Go at whatever speed feels comfortable so you can understand what you're reading. And what we're going to do is we're going to read for 1 minute and then I'll stop you. Okay? Everyone's ready? Ready, set, and go. All right, let me stop you there. That was 1 minute. And look at the line where you stopped. And go ahead and take note of what your speed was. And compare that to what you had last time. Make sure you take note of your speed right now because I'm going to switch slides in a moment here. All right. Did you make an improvement? If you did, very good. And if you did make an improvement, go ahead and type a yes in the chat box or the questions area. I see some yeses coming through here. Okay, very good. And by the way, even if you didn't make an improvement, we only did a handful of drills. I wanted to take you through a quick sample. And these are drills, when we do our classes, we do a lot of these drills. So imagine it kind of like being on the highway. When you're driving on the highway, you're assuming there's no traffic, you're going faster than usual, maybe 70 miles an hour. And for a long period of time you might be on the highway. How does it feel when you exit the highway? That first street off the highway, doesn't it feel kind of slow? Now think about why it feels slow. It feels slow because you got used to going a lot faster on the highway, maybe 70 miles an hour. So when you drop it down, when you get off the highway, sometimes you're still going 40 or 50 in a 20 mile an hour school zone. And you don't realize it because you got used to going a lot faster. Think of these speed drills in a similar manner. They're kind of like being on the highway, so to speak. You're going faster than usual. And then we do these for an extended period of time. We only did a handful of them right now, but if you practice these a lot, and not just these drills, there are a variety of other drills to improve speed, comprehension, retention. I mentioned that we do them in our longer classes online and in person, but when you do these drills and you practice, that's how you get better at anything. So this is a good way to start building up speed. Now, if you're looking at continuing making improvements, you can take one of our online courses or our in-person classes. Let me explain a little bit about these. These in-person classes are usually 4 hours. They have breaks, obviously, and they're usually on weekends, Saturdays or Sundays. These are some of the cities where we have classes. Our schedule is always changing and updating on a week-by-week basis. Also, we have a lot of classes at cities where people invite us to do a workshop at their company or school, and they're not always 4-hour workshops. Sometimes we do 1-hour quick speed reading 101 sessions or 90-minute sessions, and we've even done longer 8-hour programs. So aside from the live classes, here's the best way to follow up this webinar. If you want to continue making improvements and you're wondering which online course should I take next, I'd suggest the Speed Reading Mastery course. And let me explain where you can get it. If you go to irisreading.com/mastery, you can get this course, and it's 12 video tutorials. The first video, all these videos, by the way, are 30 to 60 minutes in length. You can watch them at your leisure. I know this webinar is being streamed live, but these are videos where you can watch them, at any time. They don't expire. And the first one is how to read groups of words. There are exercises in that video to help you start training yourself to read groups of words, expand your peripheral vision. The second webinar in this series is how to reduce subvocalization. Remember, subvocalization was that voice you hear in your head. If you keep saying words in your head, if you say every word, you're going to be limited to your talking speed. We don't want to do that, and this webinar shows you how to break those old habits. Third video in this series is how to remember more through spaced learning. This is a memorization concept and how to improve your retention. The fourth one is essential eye training. The fifth one is learning to read and remember visually. So if you want to learn how to memorize information, whether it's vocabulary, maybe you have to remember 13 specific things in a particular order, or maybe you have a lot of detailed information. This video teaches you how to commit that to memory using a variety of memorization techniques. There's another video on how to sharpen your focus. So we talked a little bit today about how to improve your concentration using your hand. This video goes into a lot more detail and exercises on how to do so. There's also another video on high-speed comprehension strategies, another video on the most efficient way to speed read the news. The 9th webinar in this series is advanced level speed reading exercises. The 10th one is one of our more popular ones, how to read a book in one day. I think you'll find this one very fascinating. The 11th webinar is for people preparing for standardized reading tests. You know, the ACT, SAT, GMAT, LSAT, MCAT, GRE, any of these tests, if you're preparing for them, they typically have that reading test that a lot of us dread to take because we run out of time. This will teach you how to complete those tests on time and answer the questions more accurately. On the final webinar in this series is the IRIS method for strategic reading. And IRIS is an acronym for this strategy on how to approach material in a very strategic way, especially when you're dealing with technical information. So I think you'll find these videos helpful. If you go to irisreading.com/mastery, that's where you can find this course. It's a package of 12 webinars. Again, these are videos that you can watch whenever you want to watch them. They're typically 30 to 60 minutes in length. And if you go to the website, when we first did these webinars, they were $25 each. So, 25 times 12, that's a $300 package total. You could get this for only $50, and we're doing this offer specifically for people that have attended this webinar. So it's not available on our regular website. You got to go to this very specific link, and we set it up just for people that have attended this webinar. You can share it with some people if you like. And by the way, you could share this recording. When you get the emailed recording of this webinar within 24 hours, feel free to pass that along to people that might be interested, even if they're not interested in this mastery course. I think we covered some pretty good information here in the session. But this course also includes a bonus PDF on 30 tips to improve your memory. So again, if you go to irisreading.com/mastery, that's where you can find that special deal. It's available for a limited time. Summary of what we covered today: how fast you currently read. We found that out. We talked about how to improve your focus while reading, how to improve comprehension, slowing down, speeding up. By the way, improving your focus has to do with using your hand as a guide. We also discussed reading on the computer screen. Remember that Accelerator program? Helps you read faster. You can use that for training yourself too. And how to build up your speed with practice. Specifically, we went over a speed drill to do that. And if you made an improvement today, very good. And even if you didn't, these are drills you can practice and little by little get better and better with your speed. And there are also drills, like I said, to improve your comprehension, to improve retention. I've got my contact information on the screen here. I want to thank you so much for attending the webinar. I started Iris a number of years ago, and little by little we started growing through a lot of word of mouth. So if you liked what we did here, feel free to pass that recording that you get emailed to you tomorrow. Pass that along to friends. And the follow-up course is at irisreading.com/mastery. If you want to attend one of our live classes, go to irisreading.com/classes, and I think you'll find either one's helpful, online or the live classes. They have similar content. I've got my contact information here on the screen. If you have questions later that come up and you want to email them to me, you're more than welcome. You could also reach out to us by phone, and if you wanted to organize a class at your company or your school or organization, we're happy to do so. If you like what we're doing here at Iris, I hope you tell your friends about us, and if you don't like what we're doing, please tell your enemies about us, because that'll show them. So thank you so much for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.